EU will ignore the result of the Greek referendum, as will the Prime Minister who had announced it. Cyprus's new administration imposes some of the harshest austerity measures the country has ever seen. At the same time, it sells off public assets, starting with the ports and airports. But how did the loud no of a population become a yes? Before the election in 2015, Syriza promises to write off most of the debt, and voters gave the party carte blanche to go ahead. But that promise was gone less than a day after the election.
Ο πύχης είναι η διαγραφή του μεγαλύτερου μέρους του χρέους, μορατόριουμ στην αποπληρωμή και ρήτρα.
Όταν λέτε του μεγαλύτερου μέρους, πάνω από 50% δηλαδή.
Κύριε Χατζηνικολάου, αυτός είναι ο στόχος μας.
We want to create a rational plan for our debt restructure.
Okay, and you're talking about writing off half of it, is that right?
No. Listen, there is a lot of posturing before every negotiation. There's been a bit of posturing on our side.
The EU sees that the government doesn't keep its promises, even before the negotiation, and begins a relentless attack. The first blow comes from the ECB once again. After the new government is inaugurated, the ECB stops accepting Greek bonds as guarantees, forcing banks to resort to the ELA. Frankfurt can cut off liquidity at any time. A key role in the ECB's attack is held by Greece's central banker, Yannis Stonaras. When Tsipras was in opposition, he used to call Tsipras the creditor's mouthpiece. But when elected, he keeps him in the job. And Stonaras undermines all alternative plans to escape the crisis.
The central bank chief was basically bragging that behind the scenes he was undermining the government's efforts and blocking of making plans for a parallel currency if the ECB should shut down the banks.
Συγκάλεσε τους νομικούς συμβούλους της τράπεζας, παράγοντες του δημοσίου βίου που είχαν χρηματίσει οι πρωθυπουργοί, μίλησα με τον πρόεδρο της Δημοκρατίας, φτιάξαμε δηλαδή, ας το πω έτσι, ένα τείχος.
Όταν η χώρα βρισκόταν σε τρομακτική πίεση από πλευράς των δανειστών και ο Στουρνάρας, ως διοικητής της Τράπεζας της Ελλάδος, είχε ξεκάθαρα ταχθεί για άλλη μια φορά υπέρ των δανειστών και εναντίον της χώρας.
Find that rather scandalous that he can come out with that and not be put in jail, because that is basically an open coup d'etat, because he's a central banker, he has his central bank mandates, and he's bragging with doing politics. They blackmailed them and eventually even shut their banks just because the Greek people elected a government that they didn't like.
However, against all predictions, the referendum was not lost. The Greeks became the first people in history who went to vote while their banks were closed and said no to austerity. But their voice meant nothing to the EU or to the Greek government.
Alexis Tsipras changed completely and became a faithful servant of the German hegemony of Europe. When Tsipras decided that Greece's best interests, or maybe his personal best interests, were best protected by becoming a servant of Germany. Around the summer of 2015, everything changed. Greece gave up its sovereignty again, and the result is still more stagnation.
Other countries too, like Spain and Portugal, received ultimatums from Brussels and Frankfurt, saying that they should change their fiscal policy. The leaders of those states, even if they wanted to, would not be able to challenge the orders, as long as they remained in the Eurozone. The ECB determined their every move, by controlling interest rates and liquidity. The question is, why did they decide to stay in the Eurozone? And most importantly, why EU officials went as far as to take part in the overthrow of democratically elected governments to save the euro? January 1st, 1999. A new currency appears on the international markets. For some, it's like a new religion.
Το ευρώ ανάμεσα στις πολιτικές ελίτ της Ευρώπης έχει πάρει διαστάσεις όχι απλά ιδεολογίας, αλλά σχεδόν θρησκευτικής πίστης. Είναι χαρακτηριστική μια δήλωση του Γκουτιέρες που είπε ότι όπως ο Χριστός είπε στον Πέτρο ότι αυτός είναι ο βράχος μου και πάνω σε αυτό το βράχο θα χτίσεις την εκκλησία μου, έτσι και για την Ευρώπη το ευρώ είναι ο βράχος πάνω στον οποίο θα χτιστεί και το μελλοντικό ευρωπαϊκό κράτος.
Jesus, however, kicked the money changers out of the temple. They were the bankers who speculated on the equity of currencies of the Roman Empire. Basically, they set the spreads of the time and bought off political leaders with their money. 2,000 years later, the money changers got their revenge by creating their own currency.
The euro was constructed in Basel, which is where all the bankers are situated, that the people on the committee for designing it were all bankers. This is a monetary system designed to suit the finance system, not to suit the people of Europe.
Before the banks could add their finishing touches, the economic and political elites had to be convinced that they needed the new currency. And they would impose it on the citizens. It was a huge undertaking in need of a gigantic lobby.
Το ΑΜΟΕ, ο Σύλλογος για την Νομισματική Ένωση της Ευρώπης, είναι ένα λόμπι που ιδρύθηκε το 1987 και είναι βασικά ένα παιδί ενός άλλου λόμπι, της Τριγγυλής Τράπεζας των Βιομηχάνων, που είναι ίσως το πιο σημαντικό λόμπι στην ιστορία της Ευρωπαϊκής Ένωσης. Η πρωτοβουλία πάρθηκε από βιομηχανικές εταιρείες όπως η Fiat, η Philips, η Total και άλλες.
I think it was a combination of people, as you know. There were Gianni Agnelli was the forefront of the issue.
Etienne Davignon, one of the first presidents of the AMUE, has his own story to tell. The Belgian parliament revealed his role in the overthrow of Congolese Prime Minister Patrice Lumumba that led to his assassination. But he's mostly remembered as the president of the Bilderberg Group. or Vice President of the European Commission. He agreed to see us in his office at the headquarters of energy group ourv, one of the many companies where he's worked as CEO.
Agnelli was the first president, and then there was a Dutchman who left his position as CEO of Philips. And I was not in a bad position to continue. I was on the business side of the things, and I had the contacts.
Οι πνευματικοί πατέρες του ευρώ ήταν την ίδια στιγμή και οι πνευματικοί πατέρες της χρηματοπιστωτικής απελευθέρωσης στην Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση και σχεδόν όλοι τους δούλεψαν στη συνέχεια σε μεγάλες τράπεζες όπως η Goldman Sachs, η BNP Paribas και μεγάλες ασφαλιστικές εταιρείες.
But I do not consider myself as one of the founders of the monetary union.
The AMUE starts a race to impose the new currency, and soon it finds itself at the heart of decision-making in the EU. It takes part in the European Commission expert group that will define the Eurozone's final details. The members are executives from banks and multinationals such as ING, Société Générale, Fiat and IBM. Everything was ready for the euro to go into circulation. All that was needed was the politicians' consent to the demands of bankers and businessmen. And this would take place in the Dutch city of Maastricht, the birthplace of the European Union, and where the foundations for the new currency were laid.
The Maastricht Treaty is based on the ideology that the government should not crowd out the private sector. That if governments spend, that prevents the private sector from spending. And this is not true. We know that the private sector needs the government to spend. Mr. Apple, Steve Jobs, needed the American government to invest in the basic elements of the iPhone in order for him to develop the iPhone as a private product. He himself was not entrepreneurial enough to invent the internet or to invent all of those major elements of the iPhone, which could then be privatized and used in the private sector.
This is an iPhone.
The European Union institutionally supports the sorts of policies that Margaret Thatcher, of course, was most associated with. Deregulation, privatisation, cutting taxes on the rich, removing various obligations on big business. And this is what's so ironic. Margaret Thatcher and her allies became more hostile to the European Union, which actually became more supportive of the sorts of policies that they advocate.
So it is an ideology, it's an anti-government ideology, and it's deeply embedded in the construction of the Eurozone. It's also, if I may say so, not just an anti-government ideology, it's an anti-democratic ideology. It's a belief that actually you cannot trust democracies not to spend money.
With the Maastricht Treaty, the EU lays down its main objective: to prevent at all costs deficits and debts in the budgets. Even if it aggravates unemployment